وأصحابه أجمعين. فقد قال جل وعلا في كتاب المبين وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم. وقال إمام شرف الدين أبو عبد الله محمد بن سعيد البوصيري رحمه الله تعالى في قصيدته المديح: فما لعينيك إن قلت اكف فاهمت وما لقلبك إن قلت استفق يهمي أيحسب الصب أن الحب منكتم ما بين منجم منه ومضطرم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Hopefully there wasn't too much confusion about the time. It was 6:45, not 7:45. Did anybody see that and think it was 7:45? Just Anika, you probably saw it. Everybody else, okay. It's good that Muslims don't check like updates, because if they did, they'll be late. So the negligence sometimes is a good thing. The first time was right. Today, inshallah, we're going to cover two lines, so 4 hemistitches. And it's a little different to the first 2 lines that we covered. Much different. In fact, I'll introduce the difference as well. And also we'll talk about a few other issues, inshallah. There'll be no singing today. The munshids have disappeared. I think they've gone on strike here. So they're in Morocco, I think. And the backup munshids are also in Morocco. And the premier munshid is upstairs, who doesn't want to sing today. So it's very difficult to convince him, I think. So, but anyway, there's been quite, more than enough singing. I wouldn't say more than enough. There's been, we've had plenty of singing for Rabi'at first 12 days. And it was day 14 now. And so we'll do something slightly more technical today. The singing can continue tomorrow, inshallah. I assume there's loads of mawlids, even though it's contrary to kind of internet frenzy about mawlid problems. But today, inshallah, the lines are a little different to what we've had before. I wouldn't say completely different, but they're still in the Nasib tradition, but a little different. And I'll introduce, if you recall where we were, we had just finished a line. I think we did 1 line last time. Yeah, 1 line. Yeah. So the last line that we covered last week was line 2. أمهبت الريح من تلقاء كاذمة وأمض البرق في الظلماء من إضامه. And I think I gave another overview of line 1 as well. But khair. And it's been 4 weeks, I think, since we last had a lesson. The next lesson from now on, will be the first Monday of every month, inshallah. Regardless, it'll be the first Monday. Can they sort this out? It's too loud. The first 2 lines of the Burda were specifically to do with what we call tajreed nafsi. Essentially, that means the Busayri talks to himself or he creates another. It's too loud. It's kind of not Juan level loud. It's missing the echo. And he kind of recalls a memory about a particular place called Salam, and also a place called Idam. and we talked about that at length. I'm not going to go over that again. Today he changes, as Imam Tahir ibn Ashur states. Here Busiri changes his not style, but almost um, he makes how would I put it here? He takes a different direction. And poets generally do that. They'll be talking about something very specific, and then they'll talk about something completely different. It's not completely different, but it's different in terms of what he discussed in the first two lines. Today we're going to talk specifically about the Arabic word hub and qalb, which love and the heart. These are two things we'll talk about. These two lines copiously cover those two topics, and all the commentaries are. And we'll be quite surprised actually that the commentaries are not very expansive on these two lines. You don't have much on these two lines. In fact, Kharputi only dedicates around about 1.5 pages per line, so which is for Kharputi, it's not much. But it was so interesting, inshallah, we'll see. And I want to mix it with a few other topics that I've thought of as well. So the first line that we're going to cover today is فَمَا لِعَيْنَيْكَ إِن قُلْتَ اكْفُ فَهَمَةَ وَمَا لِقَلْبِكَ إِن قُلْتَ اسْتَفِقْ يَهِمِ. The approach that I'm going to take with these two lines is slightly less technical, which is I'm not going to explain the words that much because they're quite straightforward, and the importance of the line doesn't lie specifically in the words and the ambiguity. The words are very clear here. Whereas Dhu Salam was very ambiguous, it could have meant many, many different things, and Idam and these other words had very particular meanings, or very spiritual meanings. In this line, as if you have the translation, it states, فَمَا لِعَيْنَيْكَ إِن قُلْتَ اكْفُ فَهَمَةَ. What is the matter with your eyes that when you tell them to refrain, they only weep more? وَمَا لِقَلْبِكَ إِن قُلْتَ اسْتَفِقْ يَهِمِ. And your heart, when you try to rouse it, it only becomes more bewildered. Now, according to Shaykh Ibrahim Bajuri, great commentator on the Burda, has a marginalia on the Burda, and it's probably one of the most famous, more famous kind of commentaries on the Burda that people tend to use, because he has both a simplified commentary on the grammar and a quite simplified commentary on the meaning of the words, and he adds a few spiritual benefits to it as well. He states that here again, Busiri is talking about love, but there's an element of denial here, whether we don't have that before. You see, entirely here it's very clear. So he says, what is the matter with your eyes that when you tell them to refrain, they only weep more? He states that love essentially first is hidden. When people are in love, and we're going to look at that later, and 10 different levels of it. There are 10 different levels of love. He states that when people have love or are in love, they hide the love. That's the first level. You hide it. And then you almost deny it, like, oh, no, not really. It's, until there are physical signs that disprove your original denial. So, for instance, if Zayd, or let's take Majnun, Majnun's kind of the case study. Majnun and Layla, if you have Majnun originally would try to hide the love. Till, to a degree, he would try to deny it, like, no, it's not really the case, until some sign would indicate that his denial is of no merit, because it's very clear. And one of the signs that Busiri gives here is the aching heart and the eyes flooded with tears. So he states it's undeniable now. If you're not in love, then what's the matter with you? Now, he states, فَمَا لِعَيْنَيْكَ. In our tradition, especially amongst the Sahaba, and I want to try to connect these lines specifically to the companions today. To be honest, there's been one of the reasons I don't like to talk about in the Burda lesson, because it kind of spoils the Burda lesson. But there's an element now in this day and age where the Prophet ﷺ has almost, for some people anyway, has become a role model. However, that role model is kind of it's not what Allah said in the Quran. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. In the message of God is the best example for you. People are just taking the example and disconnecting the example from the person. What they tend to do is they'll say that it's the sunnah of the Messenger of God, and it'll be empty, it'll be completely, utterly empty. And even their type of love is very specific. When I talk about it today, their understanding of love is very robotic. It's like if you do something, that means you love that particular person. It's not actually the case at all. Even in a father-son relationship, um, uh, if the father tells the son to do something, just because he does that particular thing, it doesn't mean it's full of love. It doesn't mean it's full of love. It could be just because I'll just do it. So just because you do an action doesn't prove anything whatsoever. Just because you follow the sunnah, it doesn't mean you love the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. You see, love has another dimension. Following is part of it, definitely. But following alone is not sufficient. It's not sufficient. It's like knowledge, you see. You can have knowledge, but it doesn't mean that you have knowledge that's beneficial. There are a lot of professors in this country, experts in Islamic theology, but the theology served them no benefit whatsoever. And there's something very, very important. And this week I've heard from and it's also on the internet and stuff like this, of people misunderstanding the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam, misunderstanding the relationship of the Sahaba with him. I'll give you one example. When you talk about love, before I was going to give this example in the next line, but I'll give it immediately, straight away. You know, the Sahaba, people constantly call Sayyidina Umar, you know, and they misquote Sayyidina Umar, certain hadith about Sayyidina Umar radhiyallahu anh, that about he was very strict, and he was constantly telling people, reminding people, exhorting people to the sunnah, that you have to follow the sunnah. And some people make it out like it was kind of, he was just pushing people just to do the action. But if you look at Sayyidina Umar's love for the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu, it's incredible. I mean, he killed people because of the Messenger of God, or they just disrespected him, you know, and he killed a Muslim because of that, because he refused to accept the opinion of the Messenger of God. He chopped his head off, and Allah exonerated him in the Quran for it. He had an extreme amount of love for the Prophet ﷺ. We'll talk about it later, but let's look at Abu Musa al-Ash'ari very specifically. After the demise of the Messenger of Allah, I don't really like the word, but there are not many words in English for it. After the Prophet ﷺ left this world, the Sahaba have struggled a lot, and we're going to talk about that in the next line. But one specific example I want to mention now, if you want to look at real love, love is something that's uncontrollable. The governor of Medina saw a man lying literally with his face against the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. He was like lying on the grave, and he went to rebuke him. He went to rebuke him like, you know, what's this guy doing? When he turned to look, it was Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari is Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, afwan. He's a massive Sahabi. When he saw him, in one story, he asks him what he's doing, and he says, "Who do you think you are?" Like, I'm the companion of the Messenger of God. He was so overcome by his love for the Messenger of Allah, people literally sleep next to his grave. This was for a very, very long time. So that's kind of forgotten when these people kind of mention, "Oh, we also love the Messenger of God." I mean, love is very cheap word these days, you see. And it's almost like we love everybody else in a very particular way. Like we say, unconditional. You know, people love women and they show their love for women. And some of these are the same people that promote this type of thinking and this kind of undeniable, unconditional love. But when it comes to Messenger of Allah, all of a sudden everybody brings these restrictions. You know, the love that the Sahaba had for him was absolutely uncontrollable. For a man to spend his nights sleeping on the grave of the Messenger of God is an uncontrollable amount of love for the Prophet ﷺ. Or when they saw some of the companions literally going to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and taking the dust and putting it over their bodies. It's an uncontrollable amount of love for the Prophet ﷺ. You know, so I don't buy this kind of restricted for the Messenger of God. But then when it comes to, they've got more appellations for their relatives or their wives or than the Messenger of God. Oh, be careful, you know, you don't want to kind of exceed I mean, to sleep next to somebody's grave for nights on end, or to leave your hometown, to leave a place where you've where you've moved to and return just because the Messenger of God tells you to in your dream. We're going to get to that later, inshallah. So he's crying, and crying was amongst the Sahaba a great sign of love, crying. And it wasn't crying that was kind of triggered by people around them. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, if you look at just before the Prophet left this world, the Messenger of God was too ill to leave the house for Salah, and he was with his wife Aisha radiallahu anha. And he said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. And her answer was, she said, my father will not be able to lead it. And the reason she said that was because she said he has a very soft heart, and he'll be overcome by emotion leading the prayer with the word of God, because he would profusely cry. And the Prophet commanded her to tell them to tell Abu Bakr still to lead the prayer. And he would constantly send the Umar as well, they break down in their prayers because of their great connection. It wasn't a pseudo quasi type of love, it was very manifest in real true love. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, they would find him in the night time in his house, they could hear him calling for the beseeching the Messenger of God in the night time, weeping for the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. So tears were kind of true. Now it's kind of, tears are quite circumstantial now in a gathering, and sometimes it's better not to, even if people have the emotion, lest we mix our intentions up. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned a person who's truly receives the shade of Allah on the Day of Judgment. He mentioned 7. There are more than 7 actually, up to 40 people who receive the shade. But the last person in the hadith is رَجُلٌ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَالِيًا فَفَادَتْ عَيْنَهُ, a man who remembered God when he was alone and he wept. And that hadith almost is for us, like, because we don't know if our tears are true or they're not, or sometimes get caught up in that. We believe them to be true, but loving the tears for the Messenger of Allah, not for we follow his sunnah, but for him, alayhi salatu wasalam. They did an experiment with tears of actually Abdul Jabbar said he'll know better about this, about tears of joy and tears of pain under a microscope, and how they were different. The structure was different. It was incredible. I read it and it was amazing for different scenarios. I don't know how they tested it actually. Now. So it was a sign. Now it's very difficult to tell if it is. But however, I was in Damascus. This was 2002, and one of my friends, he asked one of the sheikhs. He said, I can't weep, I can't cry. It doesn't work for me, And he said, what should I do? Is there a way of changing that? And the sheikh said to him that visit graveyards and God will soften your heart. Visit death, the destroyer of all pleasures, as the Prophet said. He said that will soften your heart to cry. And it's amazing how they say that even stones reacted to the Prophet stones. And stones are inanimate, then they don't have life. And they say now that even one of the ulama, he said, even stones, they react to the Messenger of God, but hearts in this time have no reaction to the Prophet and all they did was they just touched his hand. And Anas ibn Malik, a very special hadith. He was a boy, and I mentioned this probably before. I'll repeat things as I go along. He said that the Prophet ﷺ, he just picked them up and they began to shake in his hand and call, make dhikr of Allah. He kind of gave them life, bi'idhnillah. And he put them in the hands of Abu Bakr and Umar. They carried on. He said later we picked them up, like put them in our hands, and he said it didn't work anymore. He was only a boy. He wasn't at that level of Abu Bakr and Umar where he could get the stones to react like that. But they just touched the hand of the Prophet ﷺ, which is incredible because they just touch his hand and they receive life. You see, and they would give him salam as well. Stones in the sacred precinct would give salam to the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu, recognizing him. And we're going to talk about recognition in this next line coming up. And then he says, وَمَا لِقَلْبِكَ إِن قُلْتَ اسْتَفِقْ يَهِمِ. He says, and your heart, when you try to rouse it, it only becomes more bewildered. Now, the heart is a very special thing. And I'm going to talk about some different opinions about the heart. Now, Ibn Ashur, or rather Ibn Ajiba, mentions something very, very nice about the heart. He states that First and foremost, whenever the poets mention the heart, it's not the physical element, the biological heart. It's the figurative. And he states the word in heart for Arabic is qalb, qalb, and in Arabic, qalb means to turn, to turn. And he states that it comes from the word taqallub, or connected to transformation or change. That's why it's called heart, because qalb means to turn or to transform. And he quotes a line of poverty, وَمَا سُمِّيَ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَّا لِأُنْسِهِ وَمَا الْقَلْبُ إِلَّا أَنَّهُ يَتَقَلَّبُ. He states, man is not named mankind, because the word for mankind in Arabic is insan, insan. The root words are either uns or nasiya. It's a very important word, insan. It either comes from nasiya, which means to forget, because we're always forgetting. And last lesson, if you remember, we quoted the hadith, al-arwahu junud mujannada, souls are conscripted soldiers. And we talked about how we were together then for many hundreds of years, possibly thousands, maybe, who knows, millennia, who knows. And then we come back here, we forgot those relationships, except we can feel them. We can't remember names, but we can feel the relationship that was that almost the ancient relationship we had. And we talked about this is really important, because I'll just remind you if you've forgotten what I said last time. When you meet somebody, the Prophet ﷺ, this hadith, al-arwah junud mujannada, we were like soldiers conscripted in groups then. That whoever we liked, that's with the crowd that we were in. And when you come to the earth, sometimes you meet somebody, you can feel a kind of like a connection with that person, a good connection. That's from there, it's not from here, according to Ibn Hajar. It's an ancient connection. And say that Aisha told a story about it. She said a woman came, she was, if you remember, I mentioned last time, she said she was a very like a witty woman, she was had a good sense of humor. She came to Medina and ended up staying with a woman, another woman who was very witty and had a sense of humor. And she quoted the hadith, al-arwahu junud mujannada, i.e. this meeting was before, you see. And so insan, forgetfulness, or uns, which means companionship, that we human beings are human beings because we come together. And what's important about that is Sayyidina Adam in al-Jannah, when he was created and put in Jannah, imagine what's in Jannah. It's not like here. You have every single thing that you want from material goods, but he was still unhappy in Jannah, unhappy with material, because material does not make human beings happy. If people think that they can buy here and buy, and then that will make them happy because they've bought something. You know, you have the sales now, winter sales, everybody turned up, not even knowing why they're at the sales. Just go there anyway. But if that's going to make you happy, well, the highest level of what we call material dunya could not make Sayyidina Adam happy. He was in Al-Jannah. He was in Al-Jannah, and it did not make him happy. And then Allah created for him, say, the hawa, uns, you see, companionship, which gave him happiness. So it's uns. So the Shaykh says, or the poet says, insan is not named insan except due to companionship, uns, coming together. He said the heart is not known as the heart except that it transforms, at-taqallubu. It's because it changes all of the time. Imam Bajuri states the qalb is called qalb for another reason. He says because within the heart itself, hidden inside of it, is a secret that nobody understands, and it almost protects it. He says it's contained within the heart. Now, Ibn Ashur says something really nice about the heart. He says the most common cause of love is seen. When you look at somebody, that's when you fall in love. What he says is really important, actually. He says when you look at somebody, he says love is through the eyes, essentially. It's not always true. Some of them believe that men fall in love through their eyes and women through their ears. Meaning they hear about something, but men, they have to see something. More material is superficial. So it's through the eyes. And Ibn Ashur states that, so he states you look at something, or whatever you gaze upon leads one to reflect. So you have to see to reflect. And then when you reflect, you remember every facet of that thing or person. So if a person falls in love, if a man falls in love with a woman, he sees the woman, and then thereafter he will remember every facet or a facet of that woman, her hair, her face, whatever that may be, her hijab, I don't know. And then he'll remember that, and what that does is that will kind of cause his heart to go in a state of, the word he uses is I put ferocious is the word he uses, or he sets his heart ablaze. Ibn Ashur states the word he uses for facet or recalling that person is shama'il, Ibn Ashur, which states that when you are in love, when you think about it, you look at the shama'il of the Munzur Ali, the person you looked at. It's exactly the same for the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. If you don't know what it looks like, then what are you really in love with? What you've heard, but you need to know what he looks like. You need to know all of those aspects, that he had an aquiline nose, he had a wide forehead, he had reddish skin, al-azhar, as Anas ibn Malik states. His eyebrows, they did not join, they seemed to join, but they did not. You know, how will you know if you haven't any knowledge of what the Messenger of God looks like? How can the heart then really, what will it reflect over? You know, it's got nothing to reflect over. You can't fall in love just with sunnah. You need to see the person. It's very important. That love is just not contained within, we're following, that following is love. It's not. You need to know the person. The whole concept of love is the person. The person. Now, the next line is connected to this line. That's why I don't want to spend too long on this, because we're going to return to qalb. أيحسب الصب أن الحب منكتم ما بين منسجم منه ومضطرم. Today, the main topic is hub. A really, really interesting topic, and I'm going to connect it to some stories of the Sahaba as well. The word hasiba yahsibu, or hasaba yahsabu, or hasiba yahsabu comes on 3 scales. Means dhanna yadhunnu, to think. Okay. The word sab, this is very. Do you all have burda copies, by the way? You should have it so you can see the words. Inshallah, try to bring your burda copies to lessons, unless you've memorized it. Inshallah. The word sab in Arabic, sab, means to pour something. Sab, and it means to pour it until it completely, it's flooded, basically. Yeah. Sabbul ma, you pour it and it fills the container. In love, a sab, what they refer to sab, is a person that's overflowing with love. You see, so he's connected with sab to here. Maybe the word sobbing is from that. I don't know. Who knows? Possibly. Check it out. Maybe. He connects it to crying earlier. So he states, does the one in love, a sob, the one that's pouring with love, basically, and the signs are over, they're not hidden anymore, think anna al-hubba munkatimun, or suppose his love can be concealed. You see, now this connects to the first line or the previous line, which is the overt signs are there, and we said the first state of love is that you hide it until it's a state of denial where you deny it, but then when you see the signs, there's no denial anymore. Yeah. Later he's going to say, وَكَيْفَ تُنْكِرُ حُبًّا بَعْدَ مَا شَهِدَتْ. How can you deny it when you've seen it? Yeah. Yeah. عَلَيْكَ عُدُولُ الدَّمِّ وَالسَّقَمِ. You can see clear signs of blood and illness, saqam. Now, Dr. Sure. So we're going to talk about what hub and katam as well, both of them. Now, katam is important because munkatim, this word returns in chapter 2. Katamtu sirran badali minhu bil katami. It talks about dye. Now, katam is a type of dye, actually. It's a type of dye that you use to dye your hair. Now, it's important because there's a hadith about the Day of Judgment. You may not know this, but it's really, really important. If you've got white hair, it's a very, very good thing. You know these Maulvis, they dye their hair black. It's very, very problematic. I'll tell you why. Because there's a hadith about dyeing your hair black, and it's not very good. I know it's a difference of opinion. Hanafis are pretty strict on it. They only allow you to dye your hair in jihad and for your wife. And they're both interchangeable. It's synonymous. So, my mom in big trouble. Dr. Asim is laughing as well, so he's in big trouble as well. So, what did they say about love and water? Yeah, so anyway, so there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that
in one hadith, it has some weakness to it, but the ulama generally accept it, that on the day of judgment, white hair will be munawwir, meaning it will give light on the sirat. On the day of judgment, white hair will give light unless you spoil it. And Imam Munawi said that spoiling means to dye it black. To dye it black. And somebody asked one of the Sahaba that can we dye our hair black? And he said, if you do not want light on the day of judgment. And so white's really good. It's a sign of death, which is really good that you know, because Sayyidina Umar, he used to have this man come to his house every day. And imagine, Sayyidina Umar is Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Sayyidina Umar as well, which is two things. He is Umar and Amir al-Mu'mineen, and which is his person very strong, 7'6" maybe in some narrations, 7 foot tall, very, very, powerful. Shaitan wrestled Shaitan on a path and pinned him down. So this man comes to Sayyidina Umar's house at Fajr time, and when he walks there, he says, "Ittaqillah ya Amir al-Mu'mineen," fear God, leader of telling Umar to fear God. And Umar pats him on his back and carries on walking. Like, thank you very much. Like, as really thanking him. And then one day, Sayyidina Umar comes out of his house and tells the man, in really like almost in an angry voice, he says, "Go away." And the man's like, after all these years, Amir al-Mu'mineen today tells me to go away. It took him that long to get angry with me. But he wasn't angry actually. He said, "Why? Why today of all days?" He said, "I've just seen some white hair. I don't know if it was on his beard or his head." He said, "This is enough to remind me to fear God or of death. I don't need you anymore," basically. So white hair is very, very good reminder in that regard. The first prophet ever to receive white hair was Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he asked God, "Ya Allah, what's this?" He said, "This is waqar," and like pure gold. And he said, "Allahumma zidni waqara," Allah give me more of them. So he was the first Nabi to receive white hair. And the Prophet ﷺ only had a few in the front of his hair that when he would oil his hair, you couldn't see it. And the Sahaba counted them as well. So that's what the word katam means. So ahsabu sabbu, so sabbu, you said earlier, it means to pour. And al-hub. Now I want to talk about hub. Now, from all of the kutub, to be honest with the commentaries, they talk a little bit about hub. And it's very, very surprising in terms of the commentary on the Burda. The shortest commentary on the Burda, I think anyway, is Tahir ibn Ashur's commentary. It's really short. He just like mentions a few things and a conclusion. Tahir ibn Ashur's longest section is this section on hub. He has like 2 pages on it. And it's quite a standard by, and I'm going to read it out today. Kharputi and the others, they have really esoteric discussions about hub. And at this point, I want to talk about some of the stories of the Sahaba about hub and other things. And I think you've witnessed that in the Winter Mawlid as well. A lot of stories already. Now, I want to introduce the different types of love that Tahir ibn Ashur mentions, and then the different levels of love as well. By the way, I'm not laying claim to any of these. I'm just narrating what the masters of the Burda have said. Okay, so there's no claim like, oh, I know about this. It's just kind of, I'm just, naqilul aqwala, just the person who transmits. I'm just a messenger. So Tahir ibn Ashur begins by giving the levels of love. So he states, ثم الحب له أقسام أعلاها قدرا حب الله ورسوله. He says love has different types. The greatest ever type of love, actual real love, he said, is love for Allah and His Messenger. Love for Allah and His Messenger. And he says the sign of this love, the overt sign anyway, is وَعَلَامَتُهُ فَعْلُ الْمَأْمُورَاتِ وَاجْتِنَابُ الْمُنْهِيَاتِ, is to obey God's commands, and to avoid the prohibitions, to stay away from haram. وَاتِّبَاعُ السُنَّةِ, and to follow the way of the Messenger of God. كَمَا هُوَ مُبَيَّن فِي كُتُبِ الْحَدِيثِ, as was clarified or in the books of hadith. He said, and this is very important, you're going to think you've just contradicted everything you said at the beginning, the sunnah and the personal. He said, هَذَا حُبُّ الْعَامَةِ. He said, this is just the love that the public have. Let's look at the basic love. And this is very, very important, the differentiation here. When we said, I mentioned earlier, I don't want to spoil the kind of lesson of the Burda by talking about like controversial things, but when people say loving the messenger is following his sunnah, that's a very, very basic level. Very basic. He said, Hada hubbul amma. He said, anybody can do that. He said, that's just normal standard, that's standard for them. Standard for them. You see, for general people to do. He said, hubbul khasa is much different. And he begins to go, I'm not going to go through the maratib today, different levels of what they call hubbul khawas. Yeah. And I'll give you an example about zuhud. Again, not laying no claim to it. Imam Shaykh Salih al-Farfur, in his commentary to the famous hadith of zuhud. Zuhud is abstinence. And abstinence can mean different things. He talks about this great hadith that when the man came to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, tell me, give me something that the people will love me and God will also love me at the same time. Because everybody, people kind of lie. They say, I don't care what people think, but we do it. We do care what people think. And why shouldn't we? And why wouldn't we want people to love us as well? This man was honest with Sahabi. He said, Ya Rasulullah, tell me, or give me some advice. I want the people to love me and God to love me, both to love me. And the Prophet said, and I'm gonna give the meaning of the hadith, not the words. He said, don't compete with people in the dunya, and people will love you, because there's no competition. Nobody hates a poor man. You see, if you drive an old car, people don't hate on you. It's just a point, and don't compete with people. Not that you shouldn't drive a good car, but generally people only really have hasad when you have something that they want. And he said, so he said that's what to and essentially the meaning of leave that which disconnects you from God, and God will love you. It's the meaning of the hadith. You see the meaning of the hadith. Now, Shaykh Salih al-Farfur, commentating on this word abstinence, because the hadith zuhud, izhad, is the Prophet ma bayn al-nas yuhibbuka al-nas. He states zuhud as different types. He said to basically not do haram is the abstinence of normal people, just not to get involved with haram. So you don't do haram, there's zuhud. That's a type of zahid, person who abstains. He said, so that's one. He said, then to leave that which is not the best thing to do, khilaf al-awla. This is like the zuhud of pious people. Pious people, they can do it, but they think, this is not the best thing to do. He said, to leave then that, to not enjoin in mubahat. So something is mubah, you can do it, but you don't do it because you rather do something that's mustahab, beneficial, and get reward for it, even though it's mubah. He said this is the zuhud of the khawas, of the special people. And then he said, and the last level is to only busy yourself in that which connects you to God. Yeah? And anything that busies you or takes your tawajjuh, your sight away from God, yeah, is an obstacle for, he said, هذا زهد العارفين. This is the abstinence of the highest level of the people of God. What's the saying? حسنات الأبرار سيئات المقربين. That the good deeds of even the pious people are like sins to the Gnostics. You see, so that's the highest level. So the very basic essential of what Ibn Ashur is saying is following the sunnah, where people try to keep a beard, and we try to follow the sunnah, try to drink sitting, the general sunnah. He says that's very basic. He said the real love for Allah and His Messenger is the kind we mentioned earlier of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, for instance, in his story. I'll talk a little bit later about it. Then he states the second type of love is hubbul abd, la li gharad wa intifa' bal lillah. Yeah, وعلامته ألا يزيد بالبر ولا ينقص بالجفاء. Now he states the second type of love is the love of a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for any specific purpose, goal, or intifa, any benefit, but for Allah's sake. For Allah's sake. Yeah? He does something for Allah's sake. Yeah. The third type of love that he mentions is what's called ishq. We're going to talk about the definition of ishq a bit later. Yeah, is ishq, and this is a more generally, and he states a morous type of love, and it can be love for people as well. He states Tahir ibn Ashur that you have general type of love for people. He says the last type of love is madhmum, is a detested type of love, shar'an wa aqlan. And he says وَهُوَ الْحُبُّ مَعَ اتِّبَاعِ الْهَوَى. It's full of caprice, the type of love, what we call lust these days, basically, or love for dunya. You could say that. So these are the types of love that he mentions. But what's very, very interesting is when he talks about the levels of love, which I want to talk about, and it's kind of my main topic today before I get to the stories of the Sahaba in relation to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, Tahir ibn Ashur gives 10 maratib of hub, 10 levels in his commentary to this line, 10 levels of love, maratib. And he states, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ مَرَاتِبِ الْحُبِّ كَثِيرًا. He said there are many, but he and he uses very special words in Arabic. He says the first level of love is called hawa. Hawa is not a very nice word, okay? So I just kind of, hawa is caprice. It's, I don't know, Dr. Asim's here, but I just would think it to be superficial love, it's just superficial, and involves so many other elements that dictate it, that from the dunya, for instance. And we claim, we were laughing last time about the word love in different languages and how cheap it is in Urdu, in English compared to Urdu. Like in English, you can say you love anything. I love my car, I love my phone, you can't say that in Urdu. We were laughing at you make Coca-Cola se muhabbat karta hu. You can't say that in Urdu. And in Arabic, you can't really say neither. Hub is very, very special. It's a word reserved for very special types of love. But in English, it's very, very cheaper, we have it for foods now. You see, ooh, I love it, It's like, so he says this, and he doesn't even, and the amazing thing is, Ibn Ashur doesn't even explain it. He just says hawa, caprice, that's all he says. And then he says the second is called alaqa. And he says alaqa is al-hubbul lazim. And what he says about it is essentially that it's a love that's almost intrinsic within you. It's intrinsic within you. Al-alaqa, that connects you to something else. And we have it for many, many different things. Love for your friends, love for your family members, love for your children, your loved ones. It's a natural type of love that you have. Natural type of love that you have. It's not a destructive love. It's very, very natural. And everybody has it. There's not a person that doesn't have it or that wants it. We're all connected through that. He says the third type of love is at-takalluf. The word kulfa in Arabic means like a burden. Allah says in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not give the taklif, burden somebody with more than they can bear. At-takalluf. And he says that this is an extreme type of love. Takalluf. It burdens you. It makes you feel. And you're going to say, oh, that's what Busayri is talking about. This is only level 4. Yeah. If you can imagine this to be like a computer game, and the master gets much more difficult. If you remember Shinobi, anyway, old master system references, it's going to get much heavier. So takalluf, it's not much, but it still makes it difficult for you. It's difficult to bear, and you can feel it as a burden. It's really important in the Quran. In Surah Al-Nashrah, there's a verse in Surah Al-Qada Dhahrak. It's a really nice verse because if you translate it literally, it can be very problematic. Yeah, Alladhi anqada dhahrak. He is the one. He took a lot of a burden, lifting a burden from the Prophet ﷺ, such a burden. Anqada. The word naqd in Arabic means to break something. Okay, it's used in debate as well to break somebody's evidence. Naqd. The burden that was literally, if you translated it, it would sound really odd. Such a burden that was breaking your back. Literally, but I don't like that. That was very heavy on your back. Now, if you read the general tafasir about this verse, it's really nice. The general tafasir don't say much. They talk about different types of burden, the sins of your ummah that were burdening your back. Ibn Ajiba, in what's his tafsir? Al-Bahr al-Madid. Yeah, says something really amazing. He states that this burden that the Prophet ﷺ had wasn't that. what we call tafsir ishari, he said that Allah gave a status to the Messenger of God, a status. He made him in a particular way. He said the Prophet ﷺ was worried that he would not be able to fulfill the title that God had given him, and is worrying him all the time. And God took that away from the Prophet ﷺ when he expanded his breast. And that's what he was scared of, that he would stand in front of God and not be able to fulfill the very intrinsic nature that God had given him, the disposition. Ibn Ajiba says about the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. So takalluf, and maybe that meaning has a connection to what we mentioned in the verse. The third is called law'a or la'ij. Yep. The word now, law'a, generally from la'a yalu'u in Arabic, la'a yalu'u. If you open the dictionary, you'll find it means to be overcome by amorous love, but it doesn't actually mean that. The word la'a yalu'u means to torture somebody. It means to torture. La'a yalu'u. It has one meaning connected to torture, so you can tell what type of love it is. And he states that it's for me.
This you?
It's a gift.
Yes.
MashaAllah. They come with gifts. Shukran. If I had it, I would have read some of it for you today. Khair, next time. So la yalu'u, and he states that it's burning love. And he mentions a very specific point. He said it hurts, it tortures you, but you feel some pleasure in it as well. You feel some ladha, specifically some taste in it as well. But it's very painful. The fifth type of love is ishq. You can use this. Ishq may come before. You all know what ishq is. I don't need to really comment on that. The sixth is another type of love, which he calls shaghaf. Yep. Shaghaf. Shaghafa yashghafu. And shaghaf means to hit something. To hit. Meaning it's as if you're being beaten by somebody. It's that the love feels like that, essentially. The seventh type of love is jawan or jawa. Yeah, from jawa, from jiwa, yajwa. Yep. And jawan or jawa means to be passionately stirred by love or grief. It means both, either to be stirred by love or grief, and you can see that here it means both of them will be present. Some of these are very, very close. Later we find a line in the Burda, نعم صراطيف من أهوى فأرقني والحب يعترض اللذات بالألم. اعتراض in Arabic means to mix here. The al-Busayri says pleasure, love mixes pleasure and pain. Shaykh Abul Huda recently did an extension to the Burda where he added lines to the Burda. I might from next lesson start to comment on them as well, the additions on those, and he adds the Shaykh adds a very nice line to that. The eighth type of love is tatayyum or team or tame. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this word is connected to Allah, and we'll talk about how it's connected. This type, tatayyum, means to enslave you, to make you a slave. Yeah. Now, the word tame literally means slave in Arabic. You can say taimullah to mean abdullah. It literally enslaves you, this type of love. It enslaves you. You can see that it's becoming very more difficult, the types of love now. The ninth type of love that he mentions is called tabal, from tabala yatbilu, tabal. Yeah? And tabal means to make you ill, to make you sick. Okay? Tabal, the ninth type. So the ninth type makes you literally physically ill. Yeah? Physically ill. It can kill you basically. Tabal. Yeah. And the last type number 10 of love, yeah, is al-ashir. Yeah, it's called tawalluh. Yeah, from walaha yalihu. He says atawalluh wa huwa dhihabul aqli. He said this is the love where you become insane. You've got no ability to control your senses anymore.
Not the ninth one, was it? Lam or the
Tabala. The ninth one. Tabala. Lam ya lam, sorry, afwan. Tabala. Yeah. And he states, he says, انعدام العقل, like you have no aql left. Yeah. And hawas, all your senses have gone. And he says, وَيَلْحَقُ صَاحِبُهُ بِالْمَجَانِينَ. He said, the person who's like this, he said, he's in the asylum. He's with the mad people. You see. By the way, this is a Busayri, because this type of love isn't good. When you become mad, it's not good. I'm going to talk about this a little bit actually, because we're all slightly madder. Everybody is in this day. If you're mad, like the poet said, in this generation, you're actually sane. The supposed sane people are actually madder. Mad people are all sane. So anyway, I'll talk about this a little. Some of the people of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they became what we call, in Morocco they call it majdub, but it's majdub. Jazba in Arabic, I want to talk a little. So those are the maratib of love. I'm going to comment on them now. I'll comment on the last part of the line. And then I'll give my overall commentary now. Those were just kind of the explanation of the verses. I want to talk about very specifically that last type of love. Majdub or jazba, or in a state of jazb, is a kind of a state where you're overcome. Have you heard the famous term wajd? Wajd. Do you know what wajd means? Anyone know what it means? It means to find something. Wajd yajdu means to find something. Now, wajd is a state where you realization. Now, I will tell you, I'm very clear about 99% of the wajd in this day and age is completely utterly fake. You know, my teacher, he was really vehemently against this, because a lot of people, they start to show this kind of wajd. You see them in like certain gatherings, and they all of a sudden wajd. And he said to me that what to do is quickly just take a pin, start poking the person. He said they wake up very quickly. So I added to that, kind of advanced that theory. And it's very simple. Take their phone. Watch how they snap at that wajd. Take their phone. And that's the kind of wajd we have. It's all fake, actually. You know what it is? It's what people receive in nightclubs now. You know when they go to nightclubs? Not that I've never been to a nightclub, but I'm just, it's common knowledge. Is that, once you're in the beat and it's making you, I assume, I would assume that's what they do. I haven't taken anything neither. So, and it's the music and it's the rhythm that's making them, you see, it's not a spiritual state. A lot of these people are just overcome by the rhythm. For instance, often the poetry is in Persian, they don't have a clue what it means, you see. But the qawali sounds pretty good, you see. And all of these guys are in wajd. They can't find themselves in fajr, but they have found God in the gathering. It's all fake. It's just a kind of chemical imbalance, that's all it is. Chemical imbalance. I'm in wajd all the time. When we're angry, we find wajd there as well. We lose our senses. So that's wajd. A majdub person, majdub from jazb, that's different. Is a person essentially who they define him as a person who generally you go through stages. The ulama, they say, the awliya, the Gnostics, they say, people go through stages to be trained by the great Gnostics to reach God. And every stage has a time period. Some of them, it takes them 40, 50 years. Some of them, all of their lives. They're cleaning dishes for 2 years. All of these funny, these kind of odd things now, because people now, they want to attain without struggle. You see, attain without struggle, and it's very, very odd. You see, it's unbefitting. There's a great Turkish sheikh. He had all these kind of disciples, and one of his disciples was the baker. He cooked the bread. He baked the bread. Sorry, and the sheikh so they're all waiting. The sheikh's really old. He's trained them all. And before he passed away, he said, I'm going to leave you my representative. And they're all like, everybody's after it. As Hassan al-Basri said, the last thing to leave a person's heart is hubbu riyasa, love for leadership. So they're there like, please let it be me. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. I'm not really, but really. He said, go and get the baker. He brought the baker and he sat him down, and the Shaykh said, this is your Shaykh. Because he'd been training him all this time, you see, training him. And nobody would assume that that's a level of tasawwuf. But the mother, for instance, has a high level of tasawwuf than anybody, because she nurtures, you see. You know the word murabbi in Arabic, the word for a Sufi Shaykh is murabbi. It comes from the word tarbiyah. Tarbiyah means to nurture. Allah is Rabb, Rabiba. It means to, Allah is Rabibun. Rabb is the one who nurtures. From tarbiyah, it comes from the word to plant and to nurture, and plant. And the Shaykh is murabbi. The mother is murabbiya, is the one who nurtures. That is the most difficult thing to do, you see. My teacher used to say all the time to me, see, my teacher had very specific skill. He takes people who have no knowledge, zero, he takes clean slates, that's how it works, and he trains them to high level. He said it's very easy for a teacher to take something that's made already. It's very difficult to take somebody who has nothing, you see. And it's a very, very difficult to work with somebody who's just, completely a blank slate. This is kind of the real meaning of wajd. So what these people do, sorry, going back to my point, instead of going through the training, these people all of a sudden they reach ma'rifah. With that they kind of skip some steps, and they rationally can't take it. It's too much for them, and they kind of lose certain senses in the world or attachments, and that's why they look crazy. They look mad. So they'll do crazy things. So they'll smoke, for instance, and they say, "Give me a cigarette." I met one in Medina Munawwara. I met this man, Ahmad Sufi, he called himself. But this man, he you could smell really bad odor from him. Sweating, teeth were all like he was unkempt. Walks up to me, said, "Give me a cigarette." Dude, I don't smoke. I said, "Do you know me?" "No, I don't know you." So my name's Ahmad Sufi. It's alright, Ahmad Sufi. MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum, Ahmad Sufi. And then he said, "No, Ahmad Sufi," and he had an imaginary flute. He started going, pop, 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 Ahmad Sufi. So I'm looking at this guy, and I was at the gathering of Shaykh Sjaad Hussain, who passed away now, rahimahullah ta'ala, passed away, died at 126 years of age. He was in his gathering, and he said, "You going to pray in the masjid?" I said, "Yeah." Said, do you know me?" He kept saying that, "Do you know me?" I said, "Ahmad Sufi." He said, "Give salam to the Prophet for me." He said, "The Prophet knows who I am." He knows who I am. He said, "Tell him he's Ahmad Sufi." Oh, listen to this guy. He said, "Do you know when I go to masjid?" He said, "I pray behind the Messenger of God." I just kind of looked at him and stepped back. He said, "Yeah, I pray behind the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam." And then he walked off. Then I did some digging up. I asked somebody about him. This man is from Syria. He left many years ago without passport. He was one of the murids, I think, of Sheikh Abdullah Sirajuddin. I'm not sure though. I can't remember. Or his father or his grandfather. And he was majzoob. He's majdoob. He's lost his senses. But he's a man of God. And you don't mess with those types of people. In training of spirituality, you're not allowed to take the company of these people. You're not allowed to, because they expose you, you see. They'll just all of a sudden just say, "Oh, you're a shaitan." You know what he was doing last night. Just like that. So you don't sit with them, then you're not allowed to sit with them. Because they'll just explode, they get really angry. And they just start saying things about you. You don't want to mess about with them. So you have to be very careful. Or they say, if they get angry and make a dua, it will come true. So they say, "God kill him." And there's famous stories about it amongst the Salaf even, of these types of people. They're not to be messed with. Now in Birmingham, we have hundreds of majzoobs now. You meet like two in your life, man. So as for what we call this level of majaneen, almost they lose. That's not majnoon. Is somebody who loses every sense. Some of the people of God lost all of their senses even. They weren't even recognizable anymore. They were begging God to destroy them. as Ghazali says. They wish God turned them into dust. You know, Rabia Basriya said, she said, God, between me and you there is me. She said, remove me and there's only you. So some people, they're completely lost their senses because of this type of love. So all of these types are pretty dangerous, but the last one is the most dangerous. You see sometimes people, they kill themselves over a woman, or a woman over a man, they kill themselves. You see, they go mad, they lose all senses, and it's very, very dangerous. That's why love has to be controlled, and that's why the awliya, people have to be trained in spirituality, even in loving the Prophet ﷺ. I know a person, and he started going crazy. For 15 days in a row saw the Prophet ﷺ. 15 days in a row, and he was going crazy. And he went to his teacher, and he said, I can't take it anymore. You're gonna say, what kind of, why couldn't he take it? Everybody, but whatever he was seeing, it was completely overwhelming. He didn't have the strength to cope with it. You see, so you have this type of it's not everybody should ask for it. It's very, very difficult. The burden, Shaykh Salih al-Jafri, Rahmah, passed away, and a great Imam of Azhar was sitting one day, and they said to him, I'm sorry, they're kind of tangents, but I haven't got to some of the things I want to say yet. What's the time?
2,000.
Oh, we've got plenty of time. We've got an hour. I don't prepare material till 9 o'clock because there's no singing today. You see, it's a burden. He was sitting one day, and he said, these people, they say that my Shaykh's Qutub. He said he said there can only be one Qutub. He said, by God, which Shaykh would want to be a Qutub? He said some Shaykhs, they reach the level of Qutub, not they don't become Qutub. Qutub is a very high level of spirituality. He said, who would want to be the Qutub? He said, the burden that man has to carry. He said, nobody would want it. He said, look at Khadr, who's a Nabi according to some, a Wali according to some. What did Khadr do in the Quran? What did he do? What did he do? What was the second thing that he did? Or the first thing that he did? He killed a child. He killed a boy. Killed him. Can any of you kill a child? If God said to you, kill a child, would you kill that child? A 7-year-old boy. In a completely innocent, this boy is. And God says to you, kill that boy. Could you do it? You couldn't do it. This is what these people have to do. So Khadr killed him. Why did he kill him? He saved him, as we know, really, because he would have become evil. But he was taken before he could reach that age, so he was saved. But the meaning of that story, by the way, is that what did God say? That he would replace it with something better. Replaced it. The mother gave birth to a girl. That girl married, and she gave birth to one of the prophets of Bani Israel. Anyway, that's a long story. So, but could anybody do that? That burden. Imagine that happened, and he said, who would want to be one of those types of people? So these kinds of dreams of grandeur, people have to be careful of what these people have to go through as well, the kinds of things that they have to go through. Now I want to talk about, connect this line to the Sahaba, and this next segment I want to take with the meaning of the lines. So we've covered kind of some of the mufradat and some of the words, sab and munkatim and other words. The last part, he said, "Ma bayna munsajimin minhu wa muttarimi." Probably 2 comments I want to make on that, and then we'll move on. No, actually, I'm just going to translate it. So the translation reads, between pouring tears and a blazing heart. There's some commentary to this, but I'm going to cover it later anyway when we speak about other topics. Tarim essentially means something that's blazing, but I don't really want to cover that today. But later we're gonna cover some aspects of both of these words. Now, what I want to talk about now is a connection of our tradition with these lines, with weeping, which we covered already, with love especially, and this overwhelming love, that sab that pours out. And I want to talk about its reality and the Sahaba, the Messenger of God, and the month of Rabi'ah, these things connected. together. Now, this month is very special, Rabi'. However, Imam Suyuti said that, rahimahullah ta'ala, about the Mawlid, he said that we're not for these great grandiose types of Mawlids. Imam Suyuti said it, where money is wasted and food is wasted. He said that's not the meaning of the Mawlid. And unfortunately, some of our Mawlids are not very well organized. And I've said it before, and it's probably going on the internet again. You know, people are cutting cakes on Mawlid, and I detest it with all my heart. Cutting cakes, and this is the message of God we're talking about. You cut cakes for your children, not for the message of God. I've seen people put candles on the cake. I mean, you know, these types of things. We don't need all of that. You want to love the message of God. The message of God doesn't need your cake. He needs your salawat. And he doesn't even need that, because God raises his rank regardless of whatever we say. He has no need towards us in that regard. We have need towards him. What I want to talk about now is why. So this month is special first. Then just a little point I want to make, a little dig maybe, and then you can't say it because it's important. And then I want to talk about the Sahaba. This month is very, very special. Why? Said Muhammad ibn Ali al-Maliki rahimahullah ta'ala states the following. He said Arabs had many months that were famous. Muharram was famous. The Arabs loved the month. Sacred for them. Dhul Hijjah was sacred. People came to make Hajj. Rajab was sacred. There were sacred months to the Arabs. Jahili Arabs. He said sacred to the believers, there were months. Muharram. The 10th of Muharram was the month Ashura, that Musa alayhi salam was given his opening saying, Musa alayhi salam. Some say he split the Red Sea on this day. They say it was the day that Sayyidina Adam turned to his Lord. And we believe, based on the hadith of the Mustadrak of Hakim and other variations of that hadith, that it was through the intercession of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. Forgive me for the sake of whose name was next to yours in Al-Jannah, in the hadith of Sayyidina Adam. Now, why not that month? Why wasn't he born in Muharram? Everything is done for a reason, for the Messenger of God. He's born in Rabi'. Why? Rabi', the Arabs don't have any consideration for. It's spring. Why was he born in a month that the Arabs, or our tradition, the Abrahamic tradition, has zero importance in our tradition, Rabi'? I'm telling you nothing, you will find nothing about Rabi'. Nothing. Why? Why? Why would Allah choose that much? Why not Muharram? For one reason, I only said Muhammad ibn Ali al-Maliki. He says for exclusivity. He said because so his birth will not be shared with any other event. That when you say Rabi', you don't remember Ashura. When you say Rabi', you don't remember Hajj. When you say Rabi', you don't remember Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. When you say Rabi', you say Yawm or Shahr wulida fihi Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, which the Prophet was born in. You can't think of any other event that took place in that month except the birth of the Messenger of God. Those people who say, and he died in that month, the Messenger did not die. He did not die. People don't die. This is an atheistic understanding of death. Shaitan tricked you. What's death? What's death? Ghazali says, intiqalu ruh min makan ila makanin akhar, the shifting of a soul to from one place to another. Who said the Messenger of God is dead? حرم الله على الأرض أن تأكل أجساد الأنبياء فالنبي الله حين يرزق. God has made it impermissible for the earth to consume bodies of prophets. The Messenger of God is alive and God sustains him. They're alive not like us, they're alive in the Ithmas life. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala states, prophets make Hajj and Umrah every single year. Don't take it up with me and go to talk to Nawawi, Abu Zakaria, the greatest scholar of his time. He said Hajj and Umrah every year. You know, how many prophets did the Prophet meet in the earth on the night of Mi'raj? You don't know what you're messing with. I mean, so this is the lofty status that the Messenger has in his grave. Sa'id ibn Musayyib. You know Sa'id ibn Musayyib? Put your hand up if you know Sa'id ibn Musayyib, the name, if you've heard of it. You heard of it. None of you. So I'll tell you. Sa'id ibn Musayyib is a tabi'. He's a man who met Sahaba. He's so famous and so trustworthy that if he narrates a hadith without mentioning the name of the Sahabi, they used to trust it. Because they investigated them and they found them all to be true anyway. Sa'id ibn Musayyib, when Yazid, everyone familiar with Yazid, yeah? that's pretty much enough that I don't want to say anymore, but I spoiled my Mawlid. They celebrate spoil the lesson. Yazid, when he attacked Medina al-Munawwara, he took soldiers into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Some riwayat, the animals even took into the masjid. And some of the tabi'in, they hid. And Sa'id ibn Musayyib hid in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. And they asked him later, they said, Ya Sa'id, ya Imam. He was the Imam, the greatest scholars of the Salaf, without the eye. So they said, how did you pray your salah? How did you know you were hidden in this little area without sunlight? He said, I could hear the adhan from the grave of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. I mean, this is kind of, we're going to talk about other narrations like this in a little while. Yeah. About the Messenger of God. So this month, Rabi'ah, is very special for that, for the Messenger of God. It's a spring month. Why? That's where greenery comes out. Yeah, all greenery needs lighter, perfect weather conditions. It all needs the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. So it's important for that reason. Number two, my one point that I wanted to make. We are people who come together to remember the Messenger of God in this month. That's our sole intention. And this is Sunnah of the Sahaba. In the hadith narrated by Ibn Majah, in his Sunnah, that in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, a group of people were sitting one day. It's a sound hadith. Okay? And something really important, we need to get over kind of refuting. I'm not for it. I mean, we got no time for that. I mean, people can do what they want. We're going to do what we want to do. And we spent long enough and many years them kind of spoiling our gatherings. You got your masjids, do what you need to do. We got our masjids, leave us alone. Imam Busayri says, like, leave me alone. He says, Ya la'imi fil hawal udhri ma'adhiratan mini ilayka wa la ansafta lam talumi. He says, oh, you criticize me. Like, leave me alone. That's not the translation, but that's what he's saying. He said, by God, if you knew what our emotional state was with the Messenger of God, he said, you would never blame me for it. He said, leave us alone. It's like, we're not harming you. If the lights are hurting your eyes, we'll take them off. So you'll need them on the day of judgment, trust me. Anyway, so but what I want to say here is there's no room for that anymore. There's no room for that. What we need is just to do it. We just need to remember the Messenger of Allah. And in this hadith, the sound hadith, they're sitting. The Messenger of Allah walks in the masjid of the Messenger of Allah. He said, what are you here? What are you doing? Well, why did he ask them that? You don't go to the masjid and gather together without the permission of the Messenger of God generally. Yeah. You say, Ya Rasulullah, we want to do something in the masjid. What should we do? They were just there. He's looking at, in the hadith, it doesn't mention which Sahaba were there. The Prophet asked him, what are you doing? He said, Ya Rasulullah, we've come together today to remember God and thank God for sending you to us as a ni'mah, as a bounty. For that's why we're here. You see, look at what they're there for. He said, Allah, by God, do you swear that you came for that? They said, by God, we swear that we came for that. He said, I did not question you because I doubted your intention. It's because God is praising you in the company of the angels for what you have done here. That wasn't a gathering commissioned by the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. It was commissioned by the love for the Messenger of God. They gathered in the masjid for that specific reason that we gather in the Mawlids for. So if you got a problem with us, you're going to have a big problem with Sahaba. You see, we don't do it on specific days. We do it all the time. A person who does it on specific days, something's wrong with him. Man. People just get together on the 12th of Rabi'ah. Why don't you kick him out of the majlis? You don't gather together on the 12th specifically. Love is not, sitting with my teacher. And he didn't know what Valentine's Day was. He said, Bataiye jo Valentine's Day hai. Ye kya hai? So Hazrat, Valentine's Day is 14th of February. It's where two people, but not always two people, if a person loves another person, sometimes anonymously, they give them gifts or they get together, have this, you know what it is. I explained it like that. said, "ये तो बहुत अजीब है ना." He says, "It's very odd." He said, "एक ही दिन पूरे साल में एक ही दिन." I said, "एक ही दिन?" He said, "Husband and wife for one day only, they show love." I said, "Yeah, maybe. I mean," I said, he doesn't know the background to it, like, the kind of the historical background. I said, "Is it okay? Is it allowed?" He said, "Dekhe ye masakin jo hai," he goes, "these poor people." He said, "At least they've got one day, yeah." But I said, "No, you don't know where it came from." And he said, "I don't know. No. We don't have that for the messenger of God. We don't ever get to listen on one day. It's a constant state." And we're going to look at the Sahaba, and that's why some scholars had a problem with this kind of, one day we're going to get together and that's what we're going to do. They had it with a lot of things. You see, a lot of things they had it with. You see, so even though the day that the Prophet ﷺ was born is greater than Laylatul Qadr, according to Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, greater Laylatul Qadr. What happened Laylatul Qadr, Samuel? What happens? A difference of opinion. Angels come down, your deeds are recorded. What happened on the day of the Mawlid? If we wouldn't be sitting here otherwise. The Messenger of God was born. Do you see the difference here? And he says because of that, he said it's greater the day that the Rasulullah was born, alayhi salatu wasalam. So that's the day, just my part on the day. Now I'm going to go to the part of the line's connection with the companions. I'm going to talk about some of the companions for the companions of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu. We will never ever be able to understand them. I promise you that. Ever, never. We just won't be able to comprehend their state, make ihata of their ahwal. Never ever will we be able to do it. We sit and we talk about the great kind of leadership of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. We can do that but that's not what he was about. Or the great leadership of Abu Bakr, they were about their connection to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. Their leadership is connection to us, but their connection to the Messenger of God was written or decided is primordial, known by God. And I want to talk a bit about that because it's kind of lost. It's very, I tend not to talk about persons. I don't really do talks on, we don't have lessons on personalities much. Let's have a long lecture on, except Busayri, and I'll tell you why. Like Ghazali. You see, for the public, privately, for students, we do have. Why not? Because if I talk about Ghazali, I'm going to depress myself and you. We're not going to be Ghazali, are we really? And you think about it, man, I can't stop doing this, and you're talking about Ghazali or Suyuti, who saw the Prophet in a wakeful state. Some say 40 times, some say 50 times. Or Qustalani, or Taftazani, or then you feel depressed. Leave alone Sahaba, then you are finished completely. You see, it just kind of depresses us. However, I talk about Busayri because Busayri was reformed. He wasn't like that before. I'm not saying he was like us, but Busayri was a poet who was inspired by the Messenger of God, and then he became Busayri. He became Busayri. Then before that, he was Muhammad ibn Sa'id. Then he became the Imam. But I will talk about the Sahaba today because I want to talk about some real special things about them, just because it's just so apt to. First of all, I want to talk about love. The Prophet ﷺ said, sitting with the Sahaba one day, and he said to them that the ones who love me the most. By the way, when we say that, we kind of almost exclude the first three generations. Don't think we can never love the Messenger of God like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, ever. You can't do it. We don't have the biology, we don't have the chemistry, we don't have anything. We're not that product. We're not that creation. It can't happen. When people say, "Oh, we're going to be like Abu Bakr," you're not going to be like Abu Bakr. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you took Abu Bakr and the whole of the ummah, they would not amount to him. Not because he prays more than you or fasts more than you, because God has put a secret in his heart that none of you have like him, which is the love of his message, love of me. You can't do that. You can't love the Prophet ﷺ like Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam. Yeah, and I'm going to introduce it after I mention this hadith, say the Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam, and I'll tell you why. He said, the ones that love me the most, ashaddu ummati li hubba. He said that people who have never seen me. Listen, inshallah. Yeah? Never seen me, they will come after me. He said, they will be willing, listen to this, to sell their families and give up everything they have just to see me. They're willing to give everything up for me in one narration. Just willing to just give it up to see me. لِرُؤْيَتِي. Now, it's, I would, people sometimes say, oh, and that's us. No, it ain't us. It's probably when Imam Mahdi comes in. Those people, because the Prophet ﷺ described them very specifically. But my point is what? My point is that honor has been reserved for what's to come after. So that honor is achievable in this time. You see? Because he said it himself, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said it himself. He said it himself. I want to start with, I want to start with Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra alayhi. So just as some people that I have no right to talk about Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra alayhi. Sayyidah Fatima is a piece of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. And you have to be super careful. Why? Our ulama our people of God, the Gnostics, have told us that when you say something, commenting on the words of the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, لا ترفع أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي. Don't raise your voice above the voice of the Messenger of God, and do not talk to him like you talk to each other, lest your actions disappear and you didn't know. And that last, habitat a'malukum wa antum la tash'urun. أنتم لا تعلمون in that verse. تشعرون. That your actions disappear and you know not. When they comment on that, they say sometimes you'll say something about the family of the Messenger of God, and it just comes out wrong. You have to be very careful. You have to know who you're talking about, because the Prophet Sahih Muslim said, I leave you two weighty things. If you hold on to them, you will never be misguided. In another narration, they will be separated to meet me at they would meet me at the Hawd. He said, the Quran and my family. That's a hadith Sahih Muslim, and my family. You have to be very careful. So Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam is the most beloved daughter of the Messenger of Allah. The most beloved. Okay? Not that he did not love his other daughters, but she is the most beloved to him. She is why? There's reasons for it. You see, there's reasons for it. She, as a young child, would go run out of the house. She would almost be on watch, run out of the house. That whenever the Quraysh would try to trouble the Prophet ﷺ, she would go out in his defense. As a little girl, 7, 6, 7, she wasn't scared of them. That's how much she loved ashaddu hubban yani for her father. So much so that when they upset her, say the Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, in that same narration where they threw the carcass on the Messenger of God, on his blessed body, alayhi salatu wasalam, said that Fatima cleaned it off his clothes, and she was weeping that he cursed the people who did never curse the Messenger of God did not curse people by name, but because they upset his daughter, he did. Every one of them died. Every one of them. Just like Ubay bin Khalaf, who the Prophet ﷺ said, I will slay you. And he gave him just a paper cut that killed him. And he said, for if my saliva were to have touched him that day, he would have died. You see, so you have to be very careful when we talk about Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam. Some of them say that no man, he becomes a wali except he has a stamp of Sayyidah Fatima. So she's the most beloved daughter. They say there are narrations that she would go to the grave of the Messenger of God after he left this world and literally take the sand from his grave and put it over her body. No man ever saw her except those who were mahram to her, ever. And her status is so great that even on the Day of Judgment, nobody will see her. Nobody will see her on the Day of Judgment. Even on the Day of Judgment, that the angels will lower their gaze when she crosses the bridge. That's the status that she carries. Her love for her father was for the messenger of God was such that she wanted to die. She wanted to leave this world. And she was granted it by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see. And what's amazing is you see the kind of reciprocated love here. I just want to know one thing about it, then I'll move on. When she came to the Prophet ﷺ, she was weeping. She knew what was going to happen. She had told her, you see. And Allah took every one of his daughters in his lifetime, all of them passed away, Zainab, all of them died. Except Fatima. Why not? It's amazing. Why not Fatima? It was almost a gift for the Prophet ﷺ that he didn't have to see Fatima leave this world. He didn't have to see that. Because that's how close she was to the Messenger of God, That's how close. I was shocked. I was in London. Hope this is not the case in Birmingham. I said to them, where did it say that Fatima live? Everybody's looking at me. How can you not know this? The door of Fatima, literally the door of Fatima. You've seen it. The door of Fatima, alayhi salam. Sayyidah Fatima. I've seen the door. You can't. I don't know if they've blocked it now. And the handle, what's written on it? The line of the Burda on the handle. Where's the messenger buried, alayhi salatu wasalam? Where did Fatima live? She was always connected to the messenger of Allah in every single way. In proximity, spiritually, physically. And he said to her, and he didn't have to see that. But she was given a gift as well by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She couldn't take the world anymore without her father, without the qurb to her father. You see, that God, just 6 months and God returned Sayyidah Fatima to the company of her father. They're waiting for his daughter to reach him. That's how immense her love was. How, people talk about love. Her love was so immense, she didn't want to live anymore in this world. Now that's immense love. People talk about sunnah, it's following the sunnah. But let's see it. If you love the messenger of Allah, are you willing to say today, God, just take me? A Sahabi asked for his eyesight to be taken away after the messenger of Allah left this world, and God took it away. You want to know about love? This is an extreme type of, they talk about extreme. It's very extreme. If your father passes away, or your mother, and you love them, or your children, and you say to God, oh Allah, remove my eyesight, people say, are you crazy? You want to be blind? Say, I don't want to see anything anymore. But why not that for the messenger of God? Now there we have to have restrictions. Sahaba didn't have any control of it. I say the Fatima did not, because it was connected to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. And he would get up when she would come in, and he would put her in the place that he was sitting previously. And his love was immense for Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam. She's al-Batula. She never had menses in her life. She's the pure one, Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra. And everybody should name their daughter Fatima. Everybody, just everybody. It's names in this time will save your children. You see, it's as if the names will. Imam Busayri says it in the last chapter. He says, maybe because I'm named Muhammad, I'll be saved on the day of judgment. You see, and they have a overwhelming effect on the children. I was saying to my wife last time that I was adamant. My daughter, little one's named Iman, but I want to name her Fatima as well. If I had 10, I'll name them all Fatima. It was difficult to differentiate them. You see, difficult to differentiate. I listened to Shaykh Ibrahim yesterday, and he said that he, I don't know if you heard it in this recent tour that they had. He said, my wife gave birth to a girl, and I went to Habib Umar. And I said to Habib, what should I name my daughter? He said, take 3 names, we'll cast lots and we'll pick them out. He said, what 3 names? Said Fatima, Khadija, and Aisha. He said, I met Habib Umar in front of the Rawda of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, have you got the names? He said, I've got. Look where he meets him. He said, I've got the names. He said, let's cast the lots. He said, no. He said, you give me the name. He said, no, we cast it. He said, no. He said, you give the name. I don't want it from casting lots. I want it to come from you. He said, if you want it to come from me, then he says, we don't prefer anybody over Fatima. That's it. That's like the be-all and end-all. And so I assume he named it Fatima to Zahra. That's my assumption. So that's Fatima to Zahra. I want to talk about some other Sahaba now. You want to talk about love. And I'm talking about real love. Abdullah ibn Umar is the son of Sayyidina Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar. let's look at some aspects of this hub that we're talking about. أَيَحْسَبُ الصَّبُّ أَنَّ الْحُبَّ مُنْكَتِمٌ. They say that he would be riding his camel or his horse, and he would randomly get off in different places. I've mentioned this before on the retreat. And he would just start walking, and then he would come back and get back on. And he would do it all of the time. Or he would go, get up and make a sajda somewhere. And they said, you know, what are you doing here? He said, by God, the messenger used to do it. He walked there one day, just walk there. And I thought, I want to walk where he used to walk in his foot fi atharihi. He didn't plan it. He was overcome by the connection to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. Look at the love that he had. We're about walking here. It's about sunnah. People talk about sunnah. He just wants to walk in the same footsteps. Maybe I can get the barakah of the earth. And they say, what about earth? What barakah is there in earth? Let me tell in the earth. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani talks about why the Messenger of God went to Baytul Maqdis to go to the heavens. Why do you need to go to Baytul Maqdis for? God can take you to the heavens. Correct? God could have taken it from Mecca. Why did he go to Bayt al-Maqdis? Ibn Hajar says, because Bayt al-Maqdis, the land, is the land that we will gather on the Day of Judgment. And just by the feet of the blessed Qadamain, the blessed feet of the Messenger of Allah touching the land, it would give it mercy for the Day of Judgment. It's one of the reasons that Ibn Hajar mentions. You see, the Sharaf, the lands has Sharaf now. You see, we wouldn't be able to say it otherwise. So this was the land of the great prophets of Bani Israel. It's the land of the Messenger of God as well now. He blessed the land. So you, just by him just touching that land, and that shows you just in the earth, the kind of, the power in the earth. The Messenger of Allah said, a time will come when they will destroy my city. Literally meaning they will change the soil. Do you know they've changed all the soil of Medina Munawwara? It's not Madani soil anymore, a lot of it. They brought other soil into the city. You see, he used to cure people's diseases. He used to cure their diseases. So that's Abdullah ibn Umar. I want to mention some other stories of love. I want to talk about Abu Dharr al-Ghifari and his love for the Messenger of God. Abu Dharr al-Ghifari from Ghifara tribe. They were rough people, tough people. They were bandits as well from them. Abu Dharr was different. Abu Dharr was very strict, very strict. He was so strict that he used to stand in the marketplace admonishing people. One day he was sitting with the Messenger of God. He said, Ya Abu Dharr, he said, they will cast you out of the city. What will you do? They will cast you out. They will tell you to leave. He looked at the Messenger of Allah. He said, I'm going to fight them. I'm not leaving this place. He said, you're not going to fight them. He said, you're going to leave. You're going to leave. Which caliphate was he sent out? The caliphate Sayyidina Uthman. There are reasons why, and not to talk about today. Just on the word of the Messenger of Allah, he said, Labbaik, and he left. And he said, don't worry, they'll find you. They'll find you. He was alone when he died. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud happened to be riding past. And a woman came out and she said, somebody's died, and they went in and they said, we saw Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. The Messenger of God promised him that they'll come back for him, the Sahaba, and bury him. But just on the command of the Messenger of God, he went. Sayyidina Bilal was a different story though. Sayyidina Bilal is like, he's the embodiment of, Busayri is almost like the Bilal of his time. And I don't say that with any reservation actually. He's like the Bilal of his time. Why? Because Sayyidina Bilal, he became ill. He was incredibly ill. He was in Medina and he became ill. He couldn't get up in the morning. He literally couldn't get up. And he became ill and he left. He left Medina al-Munawwara. Which person leaves Medina al-Munawwara? Who would leave it? But there must be a very good reason for you to leave it. You see? And he left and went to Syria. Or went to another place. And the Messenger of Allah there was a problem. There's a problem. And see if there's a problem between you and the beloved, you're going to know about it pretty quickly. there's a problem between you and them. See that this person is connected spiritually with the Messenger of God, connected. Sayyidina Bilal Habashi radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He had a dream, and the Prophet ﷺ said, Bilal, why have you left us? You have left us for what reason? One day, went to sleep, he didn't get it. He woke up, he's even more ill now. Goes to sleep again. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Bilal, why have you left us? Again, and then the third time he said, I have to return. And he went back to Medina al-Munawwara, which the whole story, which I'm not going to narrate, which I am going to narrate. Because it's probably the most, if you want to know about real love, it's not what Bilal did, it's what the people's reaction was. See if what love does to people, what love for the Messenger of God does to people. All of the Sahaba were very, very aware that the Prophet ﷺ left this world. When he left this world on that day, I kept saying that Umar wouldn't believe it. He couldn't take the news. So anybody who says that he's dead, he said, I'll kill him. You know, and then Sayyidina Abu Bakr calmed him down and then walked into the room, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr looked at, and this is just, I'm just going to give different stories of the love. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he beseeched the Messenger of Allah, and then he kissed his head. In one narration, Sayyidina Umar, a Sahabi turned and they saw a man weeping in the corner, and they said to Sayyidina Umar, who's that man? Yeah, who's that man? Some say it's a story, some say it's a narration, Allah knows best. Just crying in the corner, another man. He said, Dhaka Khadir Sahib Musa. So that's Khadir, the companion of Moses, who's come to the funeral or come to see the Messenger of Allah leave this world. Alayhi salatu wasalam. So Abu Bakr was overcome as well, and he kissed him on his forehead. He said, oh my beloved companion. And then he left, but that was a reaction. So Bilal said that Bilal comes back, and the story is famous, but I meant because it's very, very. So some say that the Imam Hassan and Hussein convinced him to do the adhan. Now it's important if they're in the story, because Sayyidina Bilal refused to do it. They said, do the adhan. He said, no. He said, when I did adhan and I turned my head, I saw the Messenger of God. He said, who am I going to look at? But if you want to get into if you want to get somebody to say yes, there's a very easy way to do it. You send the blood of the Messenger of God to him, the blood relatives. Nobody refuses the blood relatives of the Messenger of God. Nobody. The Al-Bayt. Some say that they sent Imam Hassan and Hussein. You see, they went and Imam Hassan and Hussein go to Sayyidina Bilal, and they say, look, we can't remember it. We want to recall that. Can you do it? He doesn't. He says labbaika. He doesn't want to do it, but you know, we have to look at who's asking. Who's asking? You know, what a good ride they have. But what an excellent rider. When the Prophet ﷺ had Imam Hassan on his back, you know, in the famous narration, and now everybody knows. But the first point of this story, in my opinion, anyway, is the most troubling, the greatest, and almost the greatest sign of love. Yeah. So people are about their business now. In this midday, by the way, this is not Aisha. We know this is midday. They're about their business. One person is farming. Medina was a small city. One person is about his business, dealing in the marketplace. One person is teaching in the masjid of the Messenger of God. Another is probably in his kaylula. Who knows what they were doing? So Sayyidina Bilal began to read the adhan. And he got to ashhadu, and he doesn't say ashhadu. Sinu Bilal sheen. He can't say sheen. And the Prophet ﷺ said the sheen of Bilal, the seen of Bilal is sheen. He would say ashhadu. Now when they heard that, what would the reaction of certain people be? They would say, oh, love is contained within just ittiba', the following of the sunnah. So they would have said, oh, Bilal's doing adhan, mashallah, let's listen to the adhan. So the mashallah, remember that adhan, what a wonderful adhan. Let's listen to the adhan. They didn't say that. You know, people now, you know, what wonderful, you know, let's go listen to this Qari, the wonderful voice the Qari has. It's not the voice of the Qari. It's not the voice of the Qari. It's the heart of the Qari, and it's the word of God. You don't need a voice for that necessarily. It's just the state of the person, you know. They didn't say, oh, remember, mashallah, let's say that Bilal is here. Nobody said that. When they heard that scene, something triggered in their minds, like something in there, it's natural triggered. They say mothers dropped their children and they all flooded towards the sound. And the nida, the call was very clear. They said, Ada Nabiyullah. I don't remember the exact word. They said the messenger of God has returned. It's kind of the most overwhelming, everybody's weeping. Their mind is not saying Bilal's voice. They don't even know if Bilal's there. All they can feel is that when they saw Bilal, they saw the messenger of God, the connection. When Bilal did the adhan, he sees the messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. They hear the adhan, the messenger of God has returned. Now people will say that's love. That's overwhelmed. That's all that triggered. And they got there, and there's no messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. And Bilal collapses at that point. Some say he did not finish the adhan, say that Bilal collapsed at that point. They had to carry him away, and he left the city. And he died sometime soon after that. This is real love of the companions, triggered by just one letter, a scene. A scene, one letter reminds them of the messenger of Allah. We have to have 10-hour durus. These people were triggered by a scene. Scene also is for Sayyid. You see, one scene triggers the greatest moment, where we talked about the types of love. Anguish, pure, bitter anguish they receive at the end of it, when they can't see the face of the Messenger of Allah, the countenance of the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. I want to talk about a few other people that were connected to their love, was connected to the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salam. The Shaykh, this is another book that I have, mentions about Imam Malik and other people as well. I want to keep it with Sahaba. The famous narration of Utbi. This narration, by the way, is remarkable because it's in every single tafsir. And I'm going to quote the verse and then I want to talk about it. About hubb. You want to talk about hubb, love for the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah in the Quran says, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. And when they wrong themselves. Well, it's not Quran. When they wrong themselves. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. The word dhulm means when they put something in a place that shouldn't have been there. Allah says, جَاءُوكَ. If only they had come to you, or they came to you. فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ. And they repented to God, asked God for forgiveness. That's not enough though. وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ. And then the Messenger of God asked on their behalf. Only then, لَمْ لِتَأْكِيد لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. Only then would they have found the forgiveness of God. Only then. This man in the hadith of Utbi, some say it's weak. It's strong enough for every single mufassir to have put it in his tafsir. Everybody quoted it, everybody mentioned it. A man comes, called the hadith Utbi, comes to the grave of the Messenger of God. Man zara qabri wajibat lahu shafa'ati. About 5 years ago, I saw something on the internet. And there was this person on the internet, Allah guide him, saying, oh, they quote a hadith. Man zara qabri wajibat lahu shafa'ati. Whoever sees my grave, my shafa'ah is guaranteed for him. He said, where is there proof for this? Where is there proof for this? We're going to go anywhere, dude. Proofs on the day of judgment. I mean, it's like, don't worry about it. It'll come. It'll be empirical. You don't need theoretical proof. It'll be empirical. And there are plenty of evidences for it. So he turns up, this Bedouin man, and he literally goes to the grave of the Messenger of God. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, I have wronged myself. God said, if you've wronged yourself, ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ, I wronged myself. Really amazing that al-Busayri uses the exact same word. You know this word, oppressed myself. He uses the exact same word in chapter 3. ظَلَمْتُ سُنَّةَ مَنْ أَحْيَا الظَّلَامَ إِلَىٰ أَنْ اشْتَقَتْ قَدَمَاهُ دُرًّا مِنْ وَرَمِ. I have wronged ظَلَمْتُ. I have wronged the way of he who, I'm going to translate it my way. Okay? I'm going to translate it, I'm going to change that now. Zalama also means to be dark. I have brought darkness to the path when he gave light to the night. That's what it means. To such that his ankles would become swollen and moan of pain, meaning they would be durra min warami, about the night of the Prophet ﷺ. Same words he's using. And he says, he says, O Messenger of God, alayhi salatu, he says, I have wronged myself. That's me. Abdullah here has wronged himself. So God told me to come to you, Ja'uka. He said, I'm not asking you. This is a guarantee. God said it. God said, I just have to come. I don't even have to say anything. God said, Ja'uka. That's all God said. And God then said, and then you make the forgiveness for me. Said, God said it. God has said it. So that's what I've come for. That he was guaranteed. He was like, that was it for him. You know. And he walked away. In several narrations, one Sayyidina Ali is asleep at the grave. Again, at the grave. Sleep. And in his sleep, the Messenger of God comes and he says, go and get that man. Tell him God has forgiven him for his sins. In another narration that some mention, they heard the voice from the grave of the Messenger of God itself, saying, oh man, God has forgiven you. From the grave of the Messenger of God. These people had a very good understanding. A very, very good understanding. You know, I'll narrate a story to you. I was at a house of a sheikh in Morocco. Okay. I'm going to narrate this story, the great man of God. I believe anyway, in my heart anyway. The great man of God. And he won't know I'm telling this story because he doesn't know really what the internet is. His name is Mawla Hashim al-Bilgithi al-Hassani, the great sheikh of the Darqa wa Tariqa. I went to his house, sitting with him. Old man, maybe in his 80s, or 70s or 80s. So we were talking and he was very quiet. He just has his tasbih in his hand. Very, very quiet. He looks at me and he says to me, he said, هل رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حقيقة? I didn't reply to him. He said, have you ever seen the Messenger of God in true light, in reality? And when they say that, they mean wakefully. He said, I still remember the words he used. He said, حقيقة. And he doesn't talk much. Some of the brothers here that I've met him will tell you he doesn't talk much. I got him talking that night though. I wrote in my journal all my conversations we had. And he says to me, I just stayed quiet. And he went quiet as well. And then he said to me, he said, I went on Hajj some years ago. And he said, I was on Hajj and I booked my ticket to come back home. I booked my ticket and then I was ready, I packed my stuff. So I went to sleep. He said, lo and behold, I'm standing in front of, not here, no, actually, what he said to me was also, then he said, هل رأيت روضة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كما كانت في عصره? Have you seen the Rawda of the Messenger of Allah as it was in his time, just after me? I just like, it wasn't even, I didn't even say anything. Then he went quiet and later he told me. So he said, in the night time, he said, I was standing, he said, in my dream. He didn't even say dream to me. I don't know what words he used. He said, there, lo and behold, I'm in front of the grave of the Messenger of God. He said, not this grave. No. He said, the grave, the Rawda. He said, that's what the Sahaba used to see. He said, and I'm looking at it. He said, lo and behold, rising from the grave is the Messenger of God. Rising from the grave is the Messenger of God. And that's his grandfather. So I looked at him. The Messenger of God, he said, I gazed upon the face of the Messenger of God. And the Messenger of God said to me, he said, Aina tadhhab ya Hashim? I said, Hashim, where are you going? He said, so I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Sayyidi. He said, Ila watani? He said, I'm going home. And he said, the Messenger of God said, Bi-idhni man. He said, by whose permission are you leaving? He said, I stood there. He said, by whose permission are you leaving? I swear to you, this is the story that he told me. He said, Ya Rasulullah, ma'indi visa. Ya Rasulullah, he said, I've got no visa. So the Messenger of God looked behind him and he said, the Indians and the Pakistan, the Bengalis were all cleaning the masjid. So we had some maqam. And he looked at me and he said, and who gives them their visa? Who gives them their visa? And he said, I looked up. He said, I give them their visa. He said, I give people stay in this city. He said, nobody has authority over the authority that I give. He said, you're not going anywhere till I tell you. He said, I woke up. He said, by God, he said, I unpacked my stuff. He said, I don't know what to do. He said, I stayed there for over 6 months until the Messenger of God gave me permission. He said, I walked through the airport and nobody asked me any questions. And I came home. That's a man's heart who's with the heart of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasalam. That's a serious. Then he said to me, I'll tell you another story. His son was there. His son walked out the room. His son is a scholar, Shaykh Abdul Kabir. He said, Hada Abdul Kabir. They have the French type of accent in Morocco. He said, Huwa kana fi sighrihi yara nabi sallallahu daim. He said, he, my son, when he was a boy, he would always see the Messenger of God in his dream. He said, to test him, I would ask him questions. I used to say, if you've seen the Messenger of God, then go and ask the Messenger of God, on this day, at this time, what did he say to me? On this day, on this time, what did he say to me? And then I believe you. And he said, he used to come back and tell me. This is a man of God, real man of. You should go meet him, inshallah. He's in Marrakesh. He doesn't come out very much though. But he's a man of God. Very simple man. You meet him, he's just a simple man. He just put food out for you to eat. That's all he does. He just walks out the room, comes back, puts food down. He very rarely talks. But this is a man whose heart is connected to the Messenger of God. He told me that his father, another one of the little stories, said, my father, he told me, his father was a great man of God as well. Said, my father, I'm talking about people's love for the Messenger, what he gives them. He said, my father said he was dreaming, he was in a dream, and he's holding hands with the companions. And in the middle of all of them is the Messenger of God. Okay. And he said, all of us in the dream, he said, in the dream, my father said, all of us ascended into the sky, into light. He said, my father said to me that when he woke up, he was standing like this. Standing like that. These are people who are connected to the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. I'm not talking Ghazali 7th century. I'm talking this century. These people, lovers of the Messenger of God, and the kind of effects. This is real. I saw a video of our Shaykh Ahmad Habbad before he left this world, and Shaykh Saeed Burhani, who's also passed away now, is in the room with him. And Shaykh Ahmad Habbad, I'm very lucky that I never got to see him in that state, in his bed. I only got to see him on his seat. You see, it'd be very difficult for me. So they're sitting there, and he was close to before he died. Shaykh Saeed says to him that Shaykh Saeed said, Shaykh Ahmad Habbad telling them to make dua for him. He said, make dua for him. And Shaykh Saeed watched the videos online, but there's no translation. He said, Sayyidi, you do it. He said, you are the one who is always with the Messenger of God. That was a man's level. Some people would say in Damascus that he would be seen with the Messenger of God. Shaykh Ahmad Habbad. He was a man, he was a grandson of the Prophet ﷺ as well, but he was a man that was always connected to the Messenger of God. Not just through practice. He's just overwhelmed by the Messenger of Allah, overwhelmed by the person of the Messenger of Allah. Like Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said, Kitab al-Ruh, his soul encompasses the cosmos. About the Messenger of Allah, some other Sahaba that I might mention before I mentioned earlier the Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and the grave. He was leaning his face against the grave of the Messenger of Allah, Now I'm going to conclude here then, inshallah. I had some more preparation, but we're getting to the end. I don't like going over the time. Now, I just want to finish off with this point. Ahlul Sunnah, you know, we're always criticized, or sometimes criticized that people say, "Oh, these same people, they don't practice properly." And yeah, I'm against that. Anybody who doesn't practice or follow the Sunnah is wrong. Is wrong. Is completely wrong. But that doesn't mean the person doesn't have love in them. Bear that in mind. Love is can be different. Nu'ayman is clear about that. When he drank alcohol, but he loved the Messenger of God. Don't curse him. فَإِنَّهُ يُحِبُّ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. He loves God and His Messenger. He loves God and His Messenger. You see. And here I want to say the following, and I'm going to finish off with this. Is that I personally think that we have lost a kind of connection to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. You see, we have definitely lost the connection. Because if we hadn't, then why don't we see him? Question is very simple. If we haven't lost the connection, then where is the Messenger of God to us? The people who love the Messenger of God see the Messenger of God, or he sees them, or comes to visit them. And I would say that our lifelong ambition is to see the Messenger of God in our dreams and in a wakeful state, if that be possible. But he would definitely be there if we see him in our dreams. And he, alayhi salatu wasalam, I mentioned earlier, the earlier segments, and I think that's that absolute love. And on the Day of Judgment, he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, al-mar'u ma'a man ahab, that the one who, the one is with the one who he loves, with the one he loves. Anas ibn Malik was dancing on that day, dancing. He said, "Ya Rasulullah, easy." No doubt, yeah, it's done. It's done, but not done for us. And I personally think that we not need to have gatherings like this. We need to have hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. We need to have gatherings. I tell you what people lack in this day and age. Why is depression so widespread? Because people don't feel love from anybody. Let me tell you something. The Messenger loves all of us. You see, all of us. He loves all of ashaddu hubban. So much so that he would stay up all of those nights and say, Allah wa in tu'adhibum fa innahum ibadu. Allah, if you punish them, they are your people, but if you forgive them, you are the greatest, the most wise. He pains the Messenger of God. Nothing pains him more to see his followers upset. Pains the Messenger of God to see them upset. 2, when they break ties. He loves nothing more than when they love him. Reciprocation. On the Day of Judgment, everybody will find out. On the Sirat, you know, I just want to probably mention the Sirat a little bit. Sayyidah Aisha said, Ya Rasulullah, will a beloved remember the one that he loves, and will they remember each other on the Day of Judgment? He said, Ya Aisha, yes, they will. Not in 3 places, though. And he mentioned the 3 places. And then later in the commentary to that hadith is the discussion about the Sirat. That the Messenger of God stands at the Sirat. Just look at the whole scene. He doesn't cross it yet. And he waits for his people to come. He will advance first over the Buraq, but saying what? He waits for his people, saying, Allahumma sallim, sallim, or Ya Rabb sallim, sallim. God, make it easy for them to cross it. At every juncture, the Prophet ﷺ says, Allahumma or Ya Rabb sallim, sallim. And he said, no prophet can speak on that day before I speak. Nobody can speak until I speak. And that's something very, very important, that imagine on the Day of Judgment, that we are in that gathering. I said in London, people talk about the Mawlid here. Imagine the Mawlid in Al-Jannah. People have the hair of the Messenger of God. Often they don't have adab, to be honest with you, but anyway, they have the hair. Look at the state of people just to see the hair of the Messenger of God, just to see. What if the Messenger of God was sitting there? Imagine those Mawlids. Because they're going to be Mawlids. They're going to be parties, very big heavenly parties, very big heavenly Mawlids. But the difference is not with Zayd or Bakr, with Abu Bakr and Zayd ibn Thabit and Hassan ibn Thabit and Umar ibn Khattab and Anas ibn Malik. You see those, and Fatima Zahra. Imagine that. Isn't it worth it for that? For us, is it not worth the presence? Imagine that Mawlid. And that's why they say the heavens. When people say, what are we going to do in heaven? Are we going to get bored? No, no, we're just going to have mawlids. I mean, who's going to get bored of that? You see, people in Rabi don't want it to finish. It's like, oh, tomorrow I'm going here. And they go for the food, they go for the singing, and they go for the company. But you're going to get the best food, you're going to get the best singing, and boy, are you going to get the best company. In the company, with Rafiq al-A'la, company of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. Yeah, the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, that's my advice to myself. Those are the 2 lines of al-Busayri that we finished with 2 lines today. Next time is much different. Layla Majnoon is going to come back. Imra'ul Case is coming next time. Kafa nabki min dhikr habibi wa manzili. Next month. This is going to take a very long time. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم وأتوب إليه. Just some, please can you put, you know what, we need your emails, not because we want your money or anything. We need your emails because then we can update you on all the things. If you just, even if you put it down already, put it down again. We just need to build a database so we can inform you if there's something's going on, if there's cancellation, a delay, all of our, we want to make one really big. Stop the recording, I want to say something.